I'm going to talk about the basic principles, concepts, and strategies in set pieces. And Tony Kroos is my favorite player. This is how he got into the picture. What I think is really important is to check the data, or this is the way how I check the data in set pieces. I'm going to share the presentation on Twitter or any other platform, so you can then open this link, which is from Stuart Reed. You might know him from Twitter. This is his own data collection based on the Premier League. And I found some interesting stuff in that, which I would like to show you. This is the defensive corners of Manchester United. Here I highlight that. And what is interesting here is that you can see the heat map where they concede a lot of touches or a lot of shots. In order to compare the data, I used or selected teams who defend in a similar way, which in this case is a mixed zonal and blocking scheme. I think that this is more of a zonal scheme where they use blockers in a different way, but the basic system and the basic idea is kind of the same. So this was from Manchester United, and this is from Manchester City, where you can see that they concede the first touches and the shots at the near side, in most cases in front of the 6-yard box, which is kind of the same, just the area that Manchester United also concedes the most shots here in front of the 6-yard box. So the next one to check is Liverpool, where it's even more clean, where they suffered the most at the near side. And then the last team to check is Leicester City, who also have the same tendency from the same system to concede a lot of shots and touches at the near side. This is the shots itself. This is from Manchester United, and you can see that the red circle is the first contact lost, and the squares, the black squares and the gray squares are the goals scored or shots blocked. And from Manchester United, what we can see is that they lose the first contacts a lot at the near side, and they concede a lot of or more shots in front of the 6-yard box at the center, which might mean that their blocking scheme or the way they try to slow down attackers, especially in this zone at the center, is not the most optimal. Here what we can see is from Manchester City. And what we can see is that where they conceded shots or where they conceded the goals from is just from the near side at the line of the 6-yard box. And where they lost the first contacts is basically outside of their scheme, where I think that this is mostly because of the opponent created great mismatches, or they tried to attack the far post, where they could create advantages against the smaller markers, because in this scheme it's usual that the first line is from basically from higher players, and the stoppers or blockers are from the smaller or shorter players who are not that great at headers. So then you can easily create mismatches or advantages. This is the Liverpool data, and this is very clear where they suffered the most, especially at this zone where they conceded a lot of goals or a lot of headers and a lot of shots. And they also had some lost contacts here in front of the 6-yard box area. And this is from Leicester, who is the most, which is very interesting, I think. They lost a lot of context at the far post. This might include that they had a small player here where the opponent saw mismatches that they wanted to exploit, and they conceded or lost a lot of first contacts here in front of the 6-yard box, which is a clear indication that their blocking scheme is not great. This is basically what I wanted to show, how I use data, or how I see the data and how I try to make consequences based on their system to make it practical and to know where the problem might be. If we check this data, we can see that almost neither of the 4 teams conceded shots from inside the 6-yard box, which might be a sign that their first line positioning is great, but they had the issues at the second line. So corners, what I find, or the way I start to analyze the corners is to check the oppositional system. This is, I think, what's the most important, to understand what the opposition is doing, if it's what type of system do they use. Basically, I separate 3 types, which is the mixed with 1, 2, 3, or with 1, 2, or 3, because if they have 4 zonal players, I believe that's much more than a zonal system. And from the zonal system, there is 2 types where they play clean zonal without blockers, and you can see that, if I'm correct, from Napoli now, who don't block the attackers, they occupy a predetermined zone, and they don't adjust really to the opposition. And the other type is where they use blocking, where usually the first line usually adjusts to the crossing angle. If it's an outswing, they set diagonally outside to have more access at the far post, and if it's an in-swing, they kind of set deeper to have a better cover in front of the goal. From the oppositional system, I think what is really important to understand how to manipulate the system and what the weakness of the specific system. From the way to attack a zonal system, I differentiate between these 4 strategies. Against the zonal system, you can use an overload valve just in basic gameplay, where you can create numerical advantages against the zonal-based system. This is the same at offensive corners. The area that you can also exploit is around the structure, in front of or behind the structure. You can basically attack those spaces. The next one is to manipulate by movement. This is also or often used at the near side to pull out a defender and exploit the space behind, or to use blocks, where you can also, or you can either block the first line and the second line. It depends on how and where you want to create advantages. What is important also when looking at defensive setups is, do they have the player at the posts, and how the goalkeeper is positioning, because some goalkeepers might have tendencies to set towards the near post or the far post, and this is also an important aspect to take a look at. And the player at the post is, what I usually say is, what would you like to achieve? If you want to prevent the header, then don't put anyone at the posts. This is also the tendency that teams who are great in defending set pieces do not put players at the posts. And although if you want to prevent the goal itself, then you should overload the posts with defensive players, because your goal is to not prevent the header, but to prevent the goal. So this is how I kind of try to differentiate between the two setups, if it's worth to put players at the post or not. My opinion is that it does not worth it, and this is what the tendency show from the international games. And what is really important, I believe, is that the defenders adjust to the attacker, because in a lot of situations, I believe that coaches tend to think that if I put 6 players, or if I put 3 players up when I'm defending a corner, then the opponent have to adjust and leave 4 at the back. Although if I'm the defending team and the opponent is arriving with 6 attackers, then I can't do that to put 3 players up. So I believe that a good attacking team is not going to get fooled by this kind of defensive traps, because if you proactively put more players into the box, then the defensive team must adjust, and they can't put or leave 3 attackers high, like how Belgium did against Brazil, if I'm correct, in the World Cup in 2018. So this is kind of how you can prevent the defensive traps, I believe. So from when you are looking at offensive set pieces, the first thing to check is the distribution, how many players to arrive, how many players to block, how many players do they have at the rebound zone, and how many players to have at the back. Is it an in-swing or out-swing? And what is important is to see the timings and the signs, because a lot of teams have specific signs, from the kicker to have 1 hand or arm up, or 2 both arms up. It might mean different variations. Or, for example, which is a very usual way to